Hey there, Sheryl here. I apologize. I am a couple minutes late thanks to this crazy technology of having a few problems. But thanks so much for joining live. Sheryl Kline here, mental toughness coach, published author, speaker, and mother of a couple of great kids who are now high school and college student athletes. And hey, Scott's in the house. Thanks for joining, Scott. Again, my apologies for being a couple minutes late. I was having some technology issues that my team has worked out. So thanks for joining live. Now let me ask you a question. Have you ever had some negative thoughts and emotions that have gotten in the way of you doing your best? Now, I know that I have, and I want to let you know that there's similarities and differences between world-class performers and us. You see, world-class performers, they have thoughts and emotions. They even have negative ones. A lot of times we experience some of the same negative thoughts and emotions that world-class performers do. So please don't think that mental toughness is just for the chosen few. Hey, Greg's in the house. Thanks for watching, Greg. So we're talking right now how to use negative emotions to your advantage. So a lot of times people think that we just need to keep negative emotions at bay so we can get on to the business of doing our best. But that is true, but it's not quite enough. So again, thanks so much for joining live. A lot of my members that are on my list are joining today. I'm so excited about that. If you're not already on my list, go ahead and join if you like to get some free content on mental toughness coming straight to you every week at www.sherylkline.com. So again, today you're going to learn some world-class tips, tools, and habits on how to use emotions, even negative ones, as a superpower. Because you know what? If you don't know how to do this, negative emotions can get the best of you, and negative emotions drive our behavior. So this is so important. It's important at work, and it's also important at home as well. So please pay attention to this. It's incredibly important. So again, Sheryl Kline here, live, coming to you, talking about how to use emotions as a superpower. So let's get to it. But before we do, I want to ask, so hey, Scott and Greg and anyone else on there, have you ever had a situation, especially an important one or a project or an interaction, where emotions have gotten the best of you and it's inhibited you from doing your best? So go ahead and drop something in there in the chat roll. I see I have a comment now. It says, now let's see what Greg said. So he had an interaction that he really wishes that he, I guess he's saying you wish he'd be on the call longer. So thanks, but go ahead and drop in the chat roll. Now Scott has something that's happened to him. So if you can be more specific, that would be great. But I will go ahead and give you an example for myself when thoughts and emotions have come up and gone in the way of me doing my best, and how I've recalibrated to end up doing the best that I can. So again, thanks so much for joining live. Sheryl Kline here, mental toughness coach, published author, speaker, and of course, mom of a couple of great kids who are now Division I student athletes. So we're talking about how to use emotions to your advantage, using negative emotions especially as a superpower. So what is the first thing that you can do? So for me, when I had to go speak, I got asked to speak a while back at Google Ventures, and I will be completely transparent with you. It was a little nerve-wracking. It was a little scary. And so my negative emotion was a little bit of worry. And so that emotion didn't just need to be dealt with. I used it as a superpower. So let me tell you how to do this. Let's hop to it. Again, thanks so much for joining live. So what's the first thing that you do if you have a situation come up that's incredibly important to you, or a situation that's generating some negative emotions? Well, the first thing you're going to do, and I wanted to show this to you. The first thing you want to do is recognize. So you want to recognize a negative emotion that you're having. A lot of times we go around and sometimes become unglued, and it turns into a downward spiral because we're not even aware of what's going on. So that's incredibly difficult. So the first thing that you want to do is recognize what emotion you are having. Now that sounds a little bit silly, but if you've ever witnessed a sporting event where someone loses a couple points and then it's a downward spiral, that's what's going on. They're not even aware of what's happening, and before they know it, it's too difficult to recover. So the first step that you need to do when it comes to turning emotions, especially negative ones, into a superpower is to recognize your emotion. What is it? Anger, fear, doubt, frustration? What is it? Then, now this is really important for you to pay attention to. The next thing you're going to do is to understand that it's okay. Now that is incredibly important, because a lot of times if people do recognize what they're feeling, if it's anger, fear, doubt, frustration, then they beat themselves up about it. And so what that does is it amplifies something that you don't want. So it can really help if you recognize an emotion that you're having, especially a negative one, and then you tell yourself it's okay. So when I went into that talk with Google, I'm like, whoa, I'm nervous about this. And you know what? It's okay. It's very subtle, but it's so much different than saying, I'm so nervous about this, but don't worry, it'll be fine. Because what happens is we don't believe ourselves. And so what Scott was saying is that sometimes he just loses his confidence. But in reality, and pardon me for being a little bit nearsighted, but he says, but in reality, the reason that maybe a client hung up on you is that it had nothing to do with him at all. So that can be really common too, is that sometimes we get up in our head. In other words, our perception becomes our reality, and our perception is sometimes wrong. So the first way, and again, thanks so much for taking the time to join live, but the first thing that you can do to turn negative emotions into a superpower is to not just recognize, but understand that whatever you're feeling, it's okay. So this comes into play too if we're talking to loved ones, especially our kids. If they are, we have some 20-year-olds and teenagers in the house, so their emotions are, they're going pretty frequently. But it's for us to recognize their emotions, and we can model this for them and say, I hear that you're really upset, and it's okay. That's so much different than saying, well, don't be upset about that, it'll be just fine. Because then people aren't being heard. So in order for an emotion to pass, we need to recognize it and understand that it's okay. All right, so what's the next step? What do we need to do next? Now, when it comes to using our emotions as a superpower, I'm going to tell you something that I use with my world-class athletes, my high-level business people. I say the CEOs in the boardroom, and also the CEOs of the household, and everyone in between, because we all have things that are important to us. What is our Olympics? What do you have going on? What is important to you? And is it important for you to show up and deliver? Now, this is going to be incredibly important for you to understand so you can really show up in those moments that matter. So the next thing that you need to do, so first you recognize an emotion you're having and understand that it's okay. The second thing you do is release it. So how do you do that? Easier said than done, of course, but what I recommend is that you take a deep breath, or you close your eyes, you take a deep breath in and exhale, listen to your breath, or maybe think of your favorite color. Think of a way to release. You might have to step out of the situation, take a walk, like I said, get a drink of water, what have you. The easiest thing to do is to just take a couple of deep breaths and inhale and then exhale, and you think of that emotion moving out of your way. So you've recognized it, you've recognized a negative emotion, you've understood that it's okay, you've given yourself permission to feel it, then you've taken a deep breath and gone to release it. So keep in mind that it doesn't mean that you are discounting it. If it's something that's really bothering you, you can come to it another time. But when you're trying to perform, especially in a situation that is very important to you, it's incredibly important that you understand that there's an appropriate and inappropriate time to feel these negative emotions. So this is one way of asking it to move aside. If you tell yourself over and over again, just don't worry about it, forget about it, like I said, it doesn't work. So think of it this way. When it comes to your emotions, especially your negative ones, by recognizing and releasing, what you're doing is you're asking that emotion to gently move out of the way rather than punch in the face, because the latter doesn't work. So again, recognize an emotion, understand that it's okay, and then release it by taking a nice deep breath. So what is the last thing that you do in order to turn your emotions, especially your negative ones, into a superpower? Now, this is something, again, that I use with all my one-on-one clients, my clients that work with me in a group, and I've taught this too at my global workshops at Autodesk, Google Ventures, Bank of America, all across San Francisco and Silicon Valley. And I am really excited to share this last one with you because it's something that I wouldn't say that it's necessarily rocket science, but it's something that people don't know, they don't understand, and they certainly don't practice it. So I'm incredibly glad to share this with you right now. So we know to recognize and release, and the last one is to strategize. So what that means is to use the information and take the information from these negative emotions and use it to your advantage and use it for something that you have control over. So let me explain. Let me go back to the example when I had to go speak at Google Ventures. So I was incredibly nervous and worried because I was in front of a group of women that in my opinion, were somewhat intimidating. And so what I did was I thought, well, let me back up a little. First, I recognized my worry. Then I took a few minutes to step outside of the situation and take some deep breaths and release it. In other words, have it move aside for another time. And then finally, I went to strategize. And if you don't remember anything else about this third step, then remember control. That is the biggest thing that you need to remember, because you want to strategize one or two things that you have control over that you can do for you to do your best. So in other words, you can learn from these negative emotions. This is how you're going to use them as a superpower. So if I look at the worry, what was I most worried about? Maybe that how they would respond to my content. And so what I did was I prepared impeccably. I made sure my energy was very high. I made sure that I had eye contact. All these things that I was checking in with, I was using my worst fear to my advantage. So in other words, if you are afraid of something, or if you have a negative emotion, you might want to look at it and think, why am I feeling that way? And what is it telling me? So in my case, my worry or fear was telling me to prepare and prepare well. So I hope that makes sense. So you want to think about if you are having any negative emotions such as anger, fear, frustration, doubt, any of those things, first recognize them, then release them, and then strategize. In other words, think of one or two things that you have control over. What did you learn from this negative emotion, and how is it going to help you to be your best? So if you have any questions, be sure to put them into the chat roll. This is just a very 10,000 foot view of how to use emotions to your advantage, even negative ones, so you can show up and deliver and do your absolute best, especially in moments that matter most to you. Now, I want to be here to support you along the way, any way that I can, and please do reach out to me if I can. You can schedule a 15-minute appointment with me on my website at www.sherylkline.com. I look forward to any comments that you might have. And we have one more question coming in, so let me go ahead and answer this question, and then I will give you one more surprise bonus, and we're going to hop off. And the question is, what about a negative emotion where I don't have 100% control? Now that is an amazing question, and I'm so glad. It looks like Scott brought it up. So thanks so much for bringing it up. The question was, again, thanks so much for joining us live. We're having a community roundtable, and I really appreciate you joining live. I'm here to help any way that I can with your mental toughness and helping you to be as amazing as possible, especially in this beginning of 2018. So the question is, what about a negative emotion that I don't have 100% control over? It is true. Now, let me tell you the difference between emotions and feelings. So in answer to your question, and the question again is, what do I do about a negative emotion that I don't have 100% control over? A lot of times, emotions, we get triggered, and we have, emotions are very reactionary. So I'll give you another funny example. I was at the gym the other day with my daughter. She got up at 5:30 in the morning, shows up at the gym, and this really crabby lady barked at her and was very mean, and my daughter ended up leaving. It made me pretty angry. And so that was a reaction, you know. So a lot of times we have reactions to things that happen. So negative emotions, we're reactionary. But what we can do, even if we don't have control over our emotions, we can have control over how we choose to feel about them. So that's the answer to the question of what do I do about negative emotions that I don't have 100% control over. Again, like I said, you can recognize them even that you don't have 100% control. So recognize that you're feeling them, know that you don't have control, and know that it's okay. And then you're going to take some deep breaths to try and release it and get yourself back, to get your focus back. And then you go back to strategizing. In other words, setting a strategy of what you do have control over. And something that you do have control over are your feelings. So if you're having a negative emotion, again, anger, fear, doubt, frustration, what have you, then you can have them and it's okay. You cannot necessarily control that emotion, but you can control how you choose to feel. So make a decision about that. How do you want to feel? What do you have control over? How are you going to move forward in that situation? So once you have control, it tends to calm you down and you are able to show up and deliver, especially in moments that matter. So I hope that answered your question. And again, thanks so much for joining live. I appreciate you taking the time. I would love to hear from you. So, and also I'm here to support you any way I can. I really want to make this content real for you. So please do reach out to me on my website. I'm glad to schedule a 15-minute call at www.sherylkline.com. Or if you're not already on my list, then go ahead and do that. You can do that on my website as well. And thanks again for joining. I look forward to seeing you next time.